Mr. Bridges.
Mr. Chair, Chief Michael Lundborg, Sheriff's Department, will be giving a presentation on the 2021 crime rates in Pierce County.
Great. Chief Lundborg.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Lundborg, and I am your patrol chief. And council member or committee member Morell, thank you very much for having me, and committee members, thank you for taking the time today. I also like to acknowledge that Chief of Staff Lauren Wallen is here with me as well, who helped with this presentation. And I don't have a whole lot of cheery news for you. And this is going to be tough. And I'm going to say a few things that are going to be hard to hear and hard for me to say. But I think it's just that important. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity. I know you've had the presentation, you've had a chance to look at the slides and some of the information already. So some of it I'm going to go through probably quickly, but I still want to hit on a few of these topics. You ever have one of those days where you wake up and it just seems to start poorly and the day gets no better throughout? It's pretty much how 2021 felt for us here in law enforcement in Pierce County. Last year was a tough year, coming off the heels of 2020 and the defund the police movement that had started, and what I like to refer to it as the vilification of law enforcement. It was a kick in the gut. 2021 began with January and a new thing that we were dealing with street racing. The new level of defiance and aggression and violence towards law enforcement kind of caught us off guard. February, we had the Blake decision from Olympia, where drugs were made legal. We could not arrest for possession of marijuana, or not marijuana, but methamphetamine, heroin, crack cocaine. It all stopped. May, we saw 3 Tacoma police officers being charged with the death of Manny Ellis. And then in July, we saw the legislative changes take place, which effectively ended proactive policing. It took away our ability to use reasonable suspicion to stop people. Chases became almost non-existent. And they took away one of our most important tools in defending ourselves and defendants at the same time with vascular neck restraint changes. There was a mass exodus that was beginning in law enforcement, the great resignation that many have heard this past year. But it began last fall, where I saw lots of people from my department starting to say enough was enough. Policing in Washington has changed, and I don't know what it's going to take to get it back, but the playing field has been leveled, and all the things that were really special about Pierce County and the Sheriff's Department are not the same. I'm going to begin real quick with South Sound 911 slide that you see here. This was shared with those who are part of South Sound 911 just to show their increase in call volume. And just really the big number there is 16% increase in calls from 2019 to 2021. But those top 3 that are on there are shootings, homicides, and stolen vehicles. The phrase I'm going to use repeatedly here for the next few slides is ridiculous. These numbers are ridiculous. Next slide. Residential and commercial burglaries for 2021. You'll notice there's a red vertical line on this slide. This represents the legislative change in July of 2021. So essentially, onto the left of that is July 24th, and newer and or older, and to the right, July 25th to present day. This indicates where 1310 and 1054 changed the way we do law enforcement. If you go to the next slide, you'll see kind of over a 2-year period of time, the uptick following that slide, or that line. The green vertical line is the start of the pandemic, and so that kind of is another tool to measure. But you'll just notice this constant, fairly constant number until the red line. Now, per our crime analysis unit, if you're looking at first quarter numbers, so we're making comparisons for first quarter numbers over the previous 5 years for the same time period. The increase in residential and commercial burglaries is up with a crime trend of about 95%. And that's where we are today. And that is becoming problematic. If you flip to the next slide, you'll see the non-residential burglaries, and I apologize, the yellow is kind of hard to see actual numbers in there. But you'll see these are the commercial and business burglaries, again, following the change in legislation. The numbers are ridiculous. Go to the next one. Again, commercial business burglaries over a 2-year period of time. Next. Residential burglaries. So these are your home burglaries. You'll see that there is a rise after the line, but then there's a drop again. Now, interestingly enough, residential burglary crimes are down. Again, looking at the crime analysis unit's crime trends for the past 5 years, this first quarter that we're in right now, compared to those 5 previous years, we are down about 22%. And we believe a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. People are working from home now more than ever. And so people aren't away from their homes and people aren't breaking in. But we also believe that people aren't reporting these like they used to. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. Again, that's just home residential burglaries, again, over a period of essentially 2 years. Next slide. Oops. Oh, yep.
Oh, wait, he said he was gonna get back to it anyway, so
Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry.
wait till then. I had a question on the residential burglaries.
Okay. Again, ridiculous. Here's stolen vehicles. And I'm going to go to the next slide because it shows the 2-year period, so you can kind of see a general pattern until the legislative change. Now, that top number for February of 2022 was a new high of 919. Last Friday, we got March's numbers, and they were even higher at 935 stolen vehicles in Pierce County for 1 month. Looking at that 5-year trend, that comparison of the first quarter of this year, we're at 150% higher numbers than we have been in the previous 5 years. Next slide. This is the month of February, statewide, county-to-county comparison. Again, the highest number there is King County, and Pierce County is second there. The numbers are ridiculous. As it relates to vehicle prowls, you'll see kind of a climb and drop on these as well. But again, when we look at the first quarter trends of this year, we are up 56% over what is normal. But this is going to be like some of those burglaries, we believe. There is less reporting of vehicle prowls happening now because people are tired of waiting for the cops to show up and take the report. People are being pushed to online reporting, and some people just don't want to do it. There's no follow-through. And people ask the question, what good is it going to do to even report this? Next slide. Here's the 2-year figure. Again, up 56%. I'm going to get to the next slide. As we talk about people and person crimes, aggravated assaults, this is where we are seeing an emboldened criminal because they know of our limitations and what it takes to catch somebody or stop somebody or question somebody. Without reasonable suspicion, our abilities to stop people is very difficult. Now, that has since changed with the latest legislative change, but these numbers are going to be reflective upon those changes from 1310 and 1054 last year. Next slide. Now we're talking about guns and gun-related crimes, and this is where it gets concerning to us and to our population, because a punch to one's face is a punch to one's face, but a gunshot that goes awry, we don't know where that bullet goes downrange, and that's where things get concerning. The numbers are high and they're spiking. Next slide shows drive-by shootings. Again, you see these numbers starting to spike over a 2-year period of time. And the next one, you see these numbers stay higher than normal. Next slide, for robberies and by firearm. Again, this is what becomes very concerning. Go to the 2-year one on the next slide, you'll see broken down over 2 years how much higher our current numbers are over what we've normally seen as what would be an average. If we are talking about that same first quarter time frame again over the past 5 years, first quarter comparisons, our robberies by firearm are up 164% over what is normal. If we're talking just Central Patrol, that is our Parklands, our Spanoways, our Grahams, our Midlands, it's 184%. Central Patrol is being hit hard. I had a conversation with a Tacoma lieutenant in charge of their investigations group 3 weeks ago, I believe, maybe closer to 4 weeks ago, and we were complaining about the numbers of robberies. And he told me they had 24 robberies in one weekend alone in the city limits of Tacoma. And if we don't think some of those folks are coming into unincorporated Pierce County just across the street to commit some of their robberies, I think we're wrong, because this is a fluid group going amongst all the areas within our counties, and it's becoming problematic. Next slide. Here's firearm-involved crimes with homicides, robberies, assaults, and rapes. And if you keep watching the news like I do, or reading about the news in the paper, and it sounds like and it feels like there are just crimes after crimes after crimes occurring in our neighborhoods, it's because that is exactly what's happening. There are a lot, and it just keeps increasing. And if you think about these crimes, these ones are manpower and labor intensive. While we are dealing with the homicides, the robberies, the big assaults, and the rapes, everything else is being put on hold. Next slide. Our homicides last year set a record for unincorporated Pierce County with 23. And we're at 12 already this year in the first quarter. And on April 2nd, if you read the Seattle Times, it had a headline that said, Seattle hits grim mark of 13 homicides in its first quarter of 2022. I think it was a new record since 2016, where they had 13 in a city of 760-some thousand residents, and that's a 2020 number. But we're at 12 in unincorporated Pierce County. We do not have the group of officers that they do, nor do we have the investigators that they do. Our investigators are being stretched to the limit with the number of homicides that they are dealing with. Our next slide here is on fatal collisions. We've talked about this. Last year we had 33 fatal collisions. The previous number there was 19. This year I believe we are at 6. Our traffic unit is currently 7 people. 2 reconstructionists, 3 technical investigators, and 2 enforcement deputies. And they're spending their time still doing the reconstruction investigations on stuff from last year as well as this year. They are busy. There is little to no enforcement right now with traffic. It hurts me to say this. But if you ask deputies why, because when they light someone up, the people just take off. We can't stop people, and they know it. It's become a joke. There are high school kids who talk about it now in their schools that say, oh yeah, just drive away. That is what is being explained. I had a deputy say, I have a hard time writing tickets to people who actually pull over for me because they're the only ones who are willing to stop and abide by the rules. Otherwise, they just take off. The street racing problem is getting crazy. Street racers are responsible for some of our fatal collisions. People who speed away, who just say, all I got to do is drive fast or drive away from the officer and they can't chase us, that's what they do. And they commit dangerous collisions in our intersections because all they got to do is run one red light and show that we're not stopping. Then they're gone. And they've caused these accidents. Months ago, a deputy said in one shift, there were 22 different driveaways that were called out on the air where someone tried stopping someone and the person just drove away. They just won't stop. 22. But that was months ago. I would venture to guess that number could be even higher now. We used to keep tabs on that in our CAD system, saying, due to this, they drove away and we can't follow. They just quit because it's happening so frequently. This is tough on a cop. Next slide. And I talked about manpower and labor intensive. For the deputy, but for our SWAT team, who's being called out more and more often because they have the tools and the equipment to deal with some of the things that your patrol person cannot. Our mental health and co-responders are being called out. Our detectives are being called out more often. Our forensics people are being called out more often. Our traffic people are being called out more often. Our Pierce County FIT, the Force Investigation Team, they've had 8 deployments already this year for officer-involved fatal incidents. And we even had another one where they weren't called out because we were down in Lewis County when someone pulled a gun on one of our officers. This world is becoming dangerous, and it's becoming difficult on our people. When we talk about health and wellness, this is where it's tough. Because the burnout, the lack of breaks, men and women are becoming tired, physically and mentally. For more than 3 weeks, I wore a mourning band on my badge, which is a piece of fabric that covers the bottom part of the badge, for one of our own officers and for one from Everett. This is taking its toll on our people. Go to the next slide. It's taking us longer to get there. Our response times are taking longer because of a variety of reasons. But just so you've got an idea, this is broken down by, I'll explain the graphs, I'm sorry. There's a priority 1 call, priority 2 calls, priority 3 calls, priority 4 calls. The first larger slide is 2017 through 2021. The smaller graph on the right is just 2021 broken in half by pre-legislative change, post-legislative change. Our priority 1 calls are your typical armed robberies, your shootings, your DVs with a weapon. Your priority 2s are your strong arms, your assaults, your DVs, your unwanted people, suspicious people. And your 3s and 4s can be interchangeable depending on how they're dispatched, but security checks, traffic complaints, motor vehicle collisions, hit and runs, motor vehicle theft reports, suspicious vehicles. But it's taking us longer to get there. When we do get there, we're spending longer at some of these calls. Our legislative changes have mandated that we do take longer, that we take more time, that we utilize de-escalation techniques of time, space, distance, utilizing extra people, whether that's negotiators, co-responders, or even more deputies. The problem we're running into is there aren't enough of them. There aren't enough co-responders. There's not enough cops. We can't pull from what we don't have, and that's becoming difficult. It's hard to pull from other agencies because they are strapped thin as well. It's not just us. And when we spend more time on these calls, this is where the next screen talks about. Everything else is going to wait. Calls are going to pend. A couple months ago, I was on my way into work when I heard of an incident occurring in the Arrowhead neighborhood, so unincorporated Pierce County in between Lakewood and Steilacoom. We had a subject who was inside a home firing off a gun while his brother was in the house. The subject was suffering from some mental health and we believe some substance abuse issues. They were able to get the caller out of the house, and we spent upwards of 5 to 6 hours there. But this was at the shift change of graveyard getting off and day shift coming on, where everybody went to this call. For a period of time, coverage in Central Patrol in East Pierce County was probably limited to a couple of people who were probably close to being home. And before we could call anybody else in, there was nobody or a very limited amount of people able to protect or provide services to roughly 246,000 residents in unincorporated Pierce County because we were all in one neighborhood in unincorporated Arrowhead area. And we spent over 5-6 hours there bringing in extra people, extra equipment, extra staff to try to deal with this subject. And the question is, how long are people going to wait? Because we believe they're not waiting as long anymore. Some people will, but some don't. Your routine calls, your assaults, welfare checks, suspicious persons, those are all going to pend for a long time. Last week I was coming back from our mountain detachment. I went out to go visit some of our deputies out there. And on my way back through Central Patrol area in Spanaway, I saw a call pop up on the screen. It was for a found property item. And I thought, this thing is going to pend probably 6, 7, 8 hours today, if that. And I handled it myself, just because I knew no patrol person is going to get to that. And this is one I'm not going to screw up as a guy who's been out of patrol for a little bit. But anything to help our people is appreciated. Toned out calls, priority calls of in-progress things are pending more and more frequently now, and this is becoming problematic. And so when people get upset that it's taking a long time, those are the same people who are now complaining to our deputies. They've been our supporters, our greatest supporters, and now they're angry with us as well. This is taking a toll on my staff. Our staff is getting burned out. There are less of us, and there are more calls. Their backup is becoming limited because there is more calls and less of them. They're slowed by the traffic to get around. We have a big area now with a lot of people in it. We are not a rural county. We are a metropolitan county. They're not getting the breaks. They're not getting the chance to decompress a little bit in between their calls. Our staffing has become problematic. These numbers here, in 2020, we had 288 shifts that were at minimum staffing. Last year in 2021, 398 shifts at minimum staffing. What isn't clear by those numbers are the numbers of times we had to mandatory someone to stay to make minimum staffing. There are shifts we had to hold 2 people over and say, you both have to stay here. I know you just worked all night, but you got to stay on day shift now so we can be at minimum staffing for the next shift until swing shift gets here. And our numbers are less now than they were in 2021. You take less time away from work, less personal and family time, less time for health care and wellness, and we are seeing that burden happen. Leave use will increase because it's the only way people are going to be able to get their time that they need with their families or to decompress. And it's hurting our people. Our current staffing levels. So your typical common method for measuring police staffing models is based on a ratio of police officers per 1,000 residents. For the 11th year in a row, Washington State has ranked 51st in the nation in police staffing levels. It's saying Washington State, and these are 2020 numbers, is at 1.19 sworn officers per 1,000 residents. If we use our staffing numbers from last week, which have since been adjusted a little bit, but if we just use this rounded number of 350 funded commissioned officers, with 290 of those Sheriff's Department positions being in an unincorporated Pierce County, and those investigative people to work in unincorporated Pierce County, we are at 0.68 for our 1,000 residents. We don't have 290 people. We have 53 less than that 290. So we actually have 237 and 237 officers for 426,700 people in unincorporated Pierce County equates to about 0.56 officers per 1,000 residents. And if you look at the other numbers that are just listed here from WASPIC, we're quite possibly the lowest staffed agency in the state. See the numbers for population in Tacoma and Lakewood and Puyallup, and seeing their 1.6, 1.58, 1.52 officers per 1,000. We are nowhere near those numbers, yet we are patrolling so much larger an area. This next slide, I talked about this back in November. We talked about who we are and what services or who we police or provide police services to in our county. Again, these numbers are from 2020, and we're talking about a population in unincorporated Pierce County and our detachments of roughly 426,700. And you add in our two contracts of Edgewood and UP, and we're up to around 473,000 residents. And then it just mentioned some of our square miles in coverage and what the populations are broken down by detachment. The next slide shows the detachments and Central Patrol. Central Patrol being districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the total population in each of those districts. Can kind of get an idea of the size in comparison. I think what's important is on the next slide you'll see this. Our current staffing levels in patrol for Central Patrol, our minimum staffing day shift is 7 for 246,000 residents. For swing shift, we're up to 8, but grave shift, we're at 6. When I started 28 years ago, that number was 6. It is still 6, but I guarantee we have a lot more residents than we did back then. You see the peninsula, foothills, mountain detachments. But then look at Tacoma with 49 square miles to patrol, Lakewood Police with 19 square miles to patrol, their population of 63,000, Puyallup Police Department, 14 square miles with a population of 42,000. Then our Pierce County District 7, which is 27 square miles and 62,000 residents. During the night, we patrol District 7 with less than 1 deputy on minimum staffing. That's tough on one person. Next slide. The impacts of staffing on our crime is not good. Last summer, we had a crime suppression team, which was 1 sergeant and 4 deputies. We canceled that to put them back into patrol. When you have this many vacancies, you've got to start filling from somewhere. And so we pulled from that crime suppression team. The 1 sergeant, 4 deputies, put them back into patrol positions. Last fall, we stopped our commercial vehicle weight control position, put that deputy back into patrol. The community liaison deputies, this group of people who, when you call to say, or you send us an email to say, this is a problem in my neighborhood as it relates to homelessness, trespassers, garbage, littering, whatever it might be, the CLDs have been the team that have been dealing with it. That was 1 sergeant and 6 deputies. It's now 1 sergeant and 1 code enforcement deputy. Those other deputies have been put back in patrol. My proactive property crimes unit, the only group that is working property crimes, used to be 1 detective sergeant and 4 deputies. It's now 1 detective sergeant and 2 deputies. The others have been put back into patrol. The special investigations unit, which was kind of the drug unit, the team that did all the surveillance and helped our criminal investigations bureau with surveillance or big projects. That was 2 sergeants, 4 detectives, and 6 deputies. And it is now 1 sergeant and 4 deputies. My canine unit, I put them back into patrol. They still have their dogs, but they're also handling patrol calls. The domestic violence unit, I find it rather ironic that I just sat through the presentation from folks, Crystal Judson. The 5 deputies that were there, they've been returned to patrol. We have a couple of detectives that have been reassigned, but all the deputies went back to patrol. And the detective vacancies that we're carrying are in internet crimes against children, the sex offender registration unit, deputies in the juvenile investigations unit, and the detective for the jail investigations. They've all been reassigned. We're leaving these spots open. The impacts of staffing on crime, I believe you received this letter from the sheriff along with our department back in February, just talking about the reassignments. But we still have to deal with these somehow. Next slide. Unless you want to read it all. I apologize. We're working crimes against people. We are not working crimes that are property related only. Your homicides, your aggravated assaults, robberies, sexual assaults, we have people to look into those. But again, there are a lot more of them and they're being stretched thin. We're not going to work all of them. Property crimes, juvenile crimes against people, we'll try, not guaranteed. Burglaries, frauds, thefts, identities. Those 2 people in our PROACT property crimes unit get reassigned back to patrol. Nobody may be working them. And in narcotics, limited to none at this point. And what's next for our callers? Thefts. You're going to go to online reporting. We're going to tell you, we've got nobody that can come and handle this one right now. You're going to have to report this online. Hopefully, people have the capability to do that. Maybe a phone reporting unit might be able to do it, or if someone really needs it, they may just have to wait. But vandalisms, vehicle prowls, attempted crimes, frauds, ID thefts, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it to those. We just don't have the resources to handle them. And collisions, we'll probably start referring people to the Washington State Patrol's website to fill out their collision forms online themselves. Unless it's blocking, we may not be coming. Go to the next. These staffing vacancies hurt, and it's getting worse. I said we had 53 when I started this. By May 27th, we will have 9 more people leaving. Some are going to other agencies. Some are just retiring out of the profession. And I will tell you, and this is personal for me. People who leave our agency and leave the profession because they don't want to be a cop anymore hurts, because we hire some of the best people in this area. Pierce County deputies are a special breed because people knew what they were getting into when they came here. But I can't guarantee they're going to keep doing this job when they're feeling the way they felt over the past few months and year. When people leave this profession to go be a cop somewhere else, I always think, well, you know what, at least they're still doing it somewhere else, because we need great cops everywhere. But when they leave this profession to not be a cop, it hurts. Because where are we getting them from? It's getting harder and harder to find people wanting to do this job. The vilification of law enforcement has just been damaging to the profession. The defund the police movement didn't do much but vilified us. And these are great men and women who just want to work for their communities and help people. There's an equity issue that I think is going on amongst law enforcement right now, and it's very difficult because we've all been put on this level playing field of these are the rules you're going to abide by. And some people can't play anymore. Some people can't get into the game. The House bills leveled the playing field. We got some changes back in this most recent session. Something that came back was the ability to utilize reasonable suspicion and be able to detain people again, which was an incredibly valuable tool for law enforcement for our people. But the fact that the chase thing didn't come back, believe me, we don't need to be chasing everything. It is not carte blanche to go out there and just say, go get them all for whatever. There's no reason for that. But the public is the one who's paying the penalty on this one. Because when my wife says, what's the deal with these Walgreens? And people are driving through the front door of Walgreens and they're stealing the ATM machines? I said, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're stealing a car. They're driving it through the front door, knocking out all the support beams and frames, and taking a chain around an ATM machine and dragging it out and stealing thousands of dollars. And when the cop pulls up and the person drives away, there's nothing we can do because that's just a property crime. Yeah, it took out someone's business. It took out that person's car who may have needed that for work, or they can't open again while it has to be made safe. But those are the people suffering. If we can't help them, we feel miserable too. We got on this job to help people, and we're not helping anybody anymore. And it's very difficult. The pay and benefits. This is the stuff I feel funny talking about, but it's true. As I said, we're working in areas where across the street is Tacoma, across the street is Lakewood, across the street is Puyallup. And we are still thought of as a rural sheriff's department. And we are not. We are a metro sheriff's department. We are dealing with problems that cities have without the numbers that cities have. Our people are saying, is this worth it anymore? That equity of, you know what, the playing field's been leveled, but the guy across the street has backup. He's got 4 more people in the same amount of, in the same district size as my entire district. To come across 27 miles to back me up, it could take a lot longer than the guy across the street who's got 4 people in that same space that can come back him up. And that's a problem to our people, saying this isn't worth it. We've got loved ones. I know it's a nationwide trend that there's this great resignation thing going on. But amongst our people, we have family members who are saying that it's not worth it. This is where I take this personal when I say, Dom Collada was one of our best. There is no doubt about it, and I'm not trying to politicize him for this, but he was young and intelligent and compassionate, and he was so damn good at what he did, and he was a tactical specialist. I mean, he was a SWAT guy who had all the tools, all the knowledge, military experience, and someone took out one of our best. I'm not at that best level. Half the people in our department are not SWAT people who are that good. But when our best get taken out, our loved ones and our families and our communities says, well, it's not worth it. How do you get people to do this? We commissioned a guy last week. He quit the next day because his family said, it's not worth it. And how do I argue that? So we talk about risk reward. I was the dive team commander for several years, and it's all been on a risk benefit system. We'll risk a lot to save a lot. The risk reward for what we're doing right now, people are saying it's not worth it. You're going to have to pay me a lot to do much in this community. This is a dangerous community. I've got one thing on there that I talk about because one deputy brought this to my attention, and it sounds funny when I say it, but there's a lot of truth in this. When it says facilities, fitness, food, and range. So this deputy, she says, I stopped by the South Hill precinct because I wanted to get I wanted to get a fork. I forgot my fork at home to eat my lunch today. The entire precinct, there wasn't a single plastic fork that they could find for her to eat her lunch. Later on, deputy goes to work the street racing emphasis, goes to the Tacoma Police Headquarters, which if you've ever been there, it's very nice. They've got a lot of stuff. It's very well managed. They sort of vending machines that you could get good food out of. They've got gyms, they've got fitness equipment, they've got locker rooms. The Lakewood PD has their own indoor range. And so this joke kind of started of, we couldn't get a fork out of our own department. And these other have this or that. When we started talking about where have you worked throughout your career, and they talk about these Taj Mahals of maybe some of these other agencies. And if you started here just before I did, you worked out of maybe an old mortuary, an old church, an old mobile home, an appliance store, an old bookstore, a pawn shop. There are differences between being a Pierce County deputy and being a city cop. I still love being a Pierce County deputy, but I don't know what I'm going to be able to do to recruit people to come here when we're competing against all these other agencies who get paid that much more, or their people get better benefits or work in better places. I don't know what to say about that. It's very difficult. Because when it comes down to it, we work in an incredibly dangerous place. I pulled these numbers because I think it's important for you to hear this. And I apologize if I've been rambling on. But I pulled the numbers. This is line of duty deaths for law enforcement officers from 1995 to present day. Line of duty deaths by gunfire. These cops were murdered in the line of duty from 1995 to 2022. West of the Mississippi, Washington is the 5th most dangerous state for line of duty deaths by gunfire. Not accidental deaths, not drownings by training accidents. These are people who are murdered. There have been 32 cops murdered in the line of duty since 1995 in the state of Washington. The only states bigger or greater were Arizona, Louisiana, Texas, and California. In Pierce County alone, since 1995, there have been 11 line of duty deaths by gunfire. 11 cops murdered by gunfire since 1995. Pierce County has more line of duty deaths than, it says the same amount as Alaska, but more than Oregon, Iowa, Hawaii, Idaho, North Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And just my department, our department, we have 4 cops who have been killed since 1995 by gunfire. The same amount as Nebraska and Montana, and more than South Dakota and Wyoming. I can't do a rah-rah cheering speech to get people to come here when their loved ones are saying, nope. After day 1 of commissioning, someone says, nope, my family says I'm not going to do this. I'm sure I've spoken out of turn. I'm sure I said something that someone's going to come back and say, you know what, you shouldn't have said that. But what I want you to know is you have some of the most incredible people working for you in the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. And I am passionate to stand in front of them and defend them in every which way possible and support them in whatever we can do to keep them here. Something has to happen. It has to be urgent and immediate to get them to stay. I don't know what else I can tell you. We may be too late already, but we are close to a very troubling time where we are not going to have the cops to provide the services that you and your constituents will expect. We know of upwards of 20-some more this year who are going to be retiring, but we know very well there are lots of lots of these deputies are watching this contract to see what happens. And they've got applications in elsewhere just waiting to hit send to see how it goes. That's probably going to come back to bite me, but I just need you to know. We need to do something for this community, and it needs to start with our deputies as well. I'm sorry. Do you have any questions?
Okay, with that, Committee Member Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the presentation, however difficult it might be to say all of that. I know it's not easy. One question on the, specifically on the presentation, and then getting kind of more to your conclusion there, or at least almost implied conclusion. On the stone vehicles, obviously the new rules applied to everywhere in the state. They're considerably higher than all of our peers, including similar jurisdictions like Snohomish County or Kitsap, obviously waiting for population. Do you have any theories on why it's that much worse in Pierce?
Historically, we've always seen a large number of stolen cars within Pierce County, but never at numbers like this. Chief Roberts, who is he oversees the investigative bureau, he might have some numbers. There is the auto theft task force that we do have one deputy or detective still involved with, but I don't have any hard, fast numbers as to why we are always that much higher. If it just relates to ports or things like that where someone can get rid of stuff, I have no clue. Chief Roberts, do you have anything?
And part of the reason I ask is when I got here, it was a point of emphasis, and it seemed to have actually improved a little bit. So it's almost like we went from things getting a little more similar to other jurisdictions to this explosion. That's why I'm confused.
It's just gotten bad, and it's just gotten worse. To explain why it's so much worse here than the others, that I'm not sure of.
And that's a fine answer too. Chief Roberts, did you have anything that, if you don't have a theory, that's fine as well. I was just curious if you did.
I have theories, but what I will offer is if this is something that you would like to delve deeper into, we can coordinate to have our detective and members from the Regional Auto Theft Task Force come in and present just on this topic to what we're seeing regionally. They track this throughout the state, but members of the Auto Theft Task Force are members of King County and Pierce County agencies. And they can talk probably more statistically on what we're seeing. Everything I would tell you would be anecdotally on my beliefs. I just wouldn't be able to back it up. But we could present those people to you that could look more in depth at that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
And my next question kind of gets to, you mentioned deputies looking to our next contract, and I guess I should make sure that I understand. Unfortunately, we have like 29 different bargaining units, so I've lost track of where we're at with the field deputies in particular. Is that under negotiation currently?
Yeah, they're still talking. And I am not part of the negotiation process with them, and I don't have full knowledge on everything, obviously, that is going on. And I understand there are limitations as to what, how the process works. And if there's ever been a time to look at other alternatives, I think I scribbled down some notes here in my, it talks about, if there's legislative rules that talk about compensation for urban sheriff's departments, that don't have the funding or compensation sources that are equivalent to their regional, metropolitan, or municipal neighbors, it's time to look at those things. I mean, I think the time was a long time ago, because again, I am just very concerned. I don't know how we're going to operate in the very near future if the trends continue the way they are. I mean, I know we're looking at, maybe I got 7 people coming back from our transit contract in July. But I also know I'm losing 9 before the end of May. And that's not counting June. We haven't gotten there yet. But this is just what I know who've submitted their paperwork. If we can't compete with the people we are next to, we are not going to be able to compete at all in hiring anybody. And that is the concern. It's a different world. The laws of supply and demand. Boy, the demand for cops is great right now, but nobody can find them. And it's a difficult market to find somebody. And especially, it's not like where you take someone and hire somebody and then you turn around and put them on the street. For a new person, it's a 14-month turnaround. I think Chief Hausner presented a month or so ago. If we can get a lateral, that's great. But you still have to train them. And so, I mean, I know that Tacoma is looking at several of our people. Lakewood is looking at our people. We just lost a couple people to Puyallup. Just lost one to Olympia. They are just looking at what's going to be the best for me and my family right now. And if it's money, it's money. If it's safety, whatever it might be, we don't have much to compete with, and that's the tough part.
And getting to one, so money is obviously the one that we typically think of from the council perspective about things that we can do.
Yep.
The sheriff is in charge of operations and all the other things, but that's a place where we can help. The one thing you mentioned that I hadn't thought about, and I probably should have, but I don't spend a lot of time in your facilities for obvious reasons. But the you kind of got to something there that I hadn't really thought about in terms of the less tangible benefits of the job and how that might be important. That was interesting to me because one thing where we are in pretty good shape is in terms of capital dollars. Is that something that you've got a more fully formed thought about than, you kind of threw it out there as in terms of this is something that's on the minds that might help in terms of competition. Is it enough of a priority that we should be asking you to be, well, not you specifically, but the department to be working with our facilities department to come up with a proposal?
I will tell you that facilities would be nice, but I think more importantly, our deputies need to feel like they're being taken care of. And if it came down to, if deputies saw a package that said, we're going to give you a new building to work out of, I think they'd rather see that money go into a compensation package.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, obviously. But I think focusing on the deputies first is probably priority number one. I will say that it's tough. Being a sheriff's department is different in the sense that we work in a variety of areas. We have, all these different places where we need to be. So having one central facility is tough to have. But when we are not together, we lose the sense of family. And I think that's some of the stuff that you see with officers looking around the region. They're not really looking at small agencies. They're not looking at big agencies. They're looking at the one that looks like still is a family. When you see a size of a Lakewood or a Puyallup or a Bonnie Lake or something like that where they all work out of one place, they know each other, they feel a bond, a community within their own, they probably feel a little better about the organization. But here it's tough because we know we have people in the foothills, in the peninsula, in the mountain, in Central Patrol. So we have to be in various places. And so while I'm excited to think of there's going to potentially be a D10 Mountain Detachment new office, would be the first time I've seen a new office building for law enforcement, built for law enforcement. That's exciting. Because we test in the stop facility or we see these other places that are like, well, that's pretty nice. Look at what they have. But we don't spend a whole lot of time in those places. While I think, yes, it would be nice to have something new, centralized, that has all the amenities that, stuff comes with, I would rather you focus your attention on the deputies and taking care of the people and supporting them so that risk reward starts to balance a little bit more.
Well, that's something we'll be bringing up here shortly with the budget amendment, and certainly that's, in line with what I kind of expected to hear, but since we had heard for the first time, I think, facilities, I was thinking, well, okay, maybe that's something we can do. Admittedly, I knew that if we put something out for the central precinct, I wasn't looking forward to my conversations with Peninsula Detachment deputies, knowing the facility that they're in, and it's, let's just say, not as nice. But I also know they don't spend much time in their office is their vehicle. So
Yes.
thank you very much for the presentation, and please do keep letting us know what we can do to be helpful. Obviously, our role is a little limited because, once we fund and support an FTE, our ability to affect filling those positions is difficult. That doesn't mean that we can't find a proper incentive package. But some of that's even outside of our control and with the executive's office and in terms of negotiations. So we'll communicate with them as appropriate. And certainly we speak to our legislators about changes that we think are necessary within the state laws to make at least Washington, a place that works. Though admittedly, I will say, this is definitely worse than I had thought, but it is something that I hear from my colleagues across the country. There is something that happened within the pandemic, something about the trauma of it, perhaps the social changes that something flicked a switch in a lot of people, and we have to get back to closer to the way things were. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Committee Member Mello.
Thank you, Chair Morrell, and thank you, Chief Lundberg, for coming and sharing on this. Is alarming news, so difficult for sure. Wanted to follow up on a couple of points that I heard, and I'll start with one. You got one request from Council Member Young about stolen vehicles and trying to dig a little deeper, especially about our peer counties like Spokane and Snohomish. That would be good to understand as you're able, and also about the firearms, the crimes with firearms were also extra alarming to learn about. So when there's an opportunity to dive a little deeper about what's going on there, I know that would be helpful. I should have started my comments by, I hope it goes without saying, but I guess we can never say it enough. You and your deputies share the utmost respect by me, and I believe every single elected council member for everything that they do every single day, and it's extraordinarily appreciated. And I think we know as best as one can without wearing your uniform every day and doing what you do every day, how difficult the job is, and our deep appreciation. You talked a bit about being a metropolitan department, population, yet having so much more square miles. You inherited the problem, right? It's not a problem of your own making. It's a problem of our growth pattern, our sprawling growth pattern for decades. That didn't happen overnight, but that's a consequence of our very sprawling growth pattern and not keeping up with resources for that growth or incorporating over time. As you've indicated and alluded to, cities do have different revenue options than county governments to be able to keep up with more dense populations and the levels of service that community members demand. In cities, they have different revenue tools, and so are able to provide those kinds of services at that level of service. And so this council, that sounds arcane, but it's true. And this council is very interested in supporting incorporations so that we can have the proper local governments in alignment to provide the appropriate levels of service for communities. So I just wanted to flag that. We just last year, after over a decade of trying, passed a behavioral health tax. Those services are just coming online now. But I'm really hopeful we'll see some modest improvements, but we've been behind the times with our peer counties and local governments in providing adequate behavioral health services. Again, it's coming online finally. Hopefully that's something we can look forward to, that our deputies desperately need to have those kinds of co-responders and services with them. So thank you for pointing that out as well. We did fund, I think, based on my recollection, we funded everything that the Sheriff's Department requested. If there's something that the Sheriff's Department requested that we didn't fund, as Councilmember Young indicated, please do let us know. We don't have a blank check. As a person of leadership in county government, you know there are constraints on everything, but with 50 plus vacancies in the department, I think we're all very interested in how can we help the Sheriff's Department fill those vacancies. That seems to be where we need to be really bearing down and figuring out what is different about this place, and what can we do to support you in filling those vacancies. That won't solve all of the problems, but hopefully gets to a good amount of the problems of overworking our deputies. So if there's a proposal, please do bring it forward. Again, to my knowledge, we funded every sheriff request proposal in the biennial budget. The last comment I wanted to make, Chief Lundberg, and this is with deep respect. I respect you deeply. I do hear the frustration in your voice, and we know you well. I do want to make sure in our rhetoric, when we're communicating, the defund the police movement, I don't know it. I don't know any council member that supports the defund the police movement. You weren't insinuating that any council member subscribes to or supports the defund the police movement. I do want to make sure when we're talking about these issues, these are really complicated issues. These are really difficult issues. No one feels them. There's a lot of communities that feel them hard, but you and the staff feel them every day. Right? Folks looking for, all of us looking for accountability, yourself included. I've heard you speak about police accountability numerous times. Folks looking for accountability, especially people of color, who have seen communities use disproportionate force, people dying in police custody over a longitudinal time. That is very, very different than folks who subscribe to a defund the police movement, which, again, for the record, no council member up here subscribes to or supports. We've been funding the police. Our communities deserve to be both protected and well served. Our deputies deserve to be in a safe environment. And like every profession deserves accountability. Those few bad actors do spoil it for the rest, and we've seen people with force disproportionately used against them, and many with death. So I just really want to make sure that we separate the police accountability work that you are helping to lead, and many are working on together, and the defund the police movement, which no one up here subscribes to.
And I appreciate you saying that, and just, yeah, I don't want anyone to think that I think anyone here has subscribed to that. The support from this council has been incredible to me and what I recognize. You have funded the things that we've asked for. You have been very supportive in the things that we're trying to do, and you're right. I don't want it to sound like I don't believe in police accountability and what maybe some of these movements may speak about, because I want the best of the best to be here, and I will hold people accountable who don't want to do what is correct or the proper way to do their job, because it makes the rest of us look poor as a result. And as far as the rest of the statements, I recognize we probably account for, what is it, 75, 78% of the budget, at least trying to remember where my numbers were, but we're an expensive bunch. We recognize that. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, was talked about is some of these vacancies that we have right now, could you use some of the vacancy savings, you know, for some immediate support? But I think you're right. The bigger thing is someone has to say something to provide some funding, because yeah, people live in unincorporated county areas because they don't want to pay the taxes, the utility taxes that go with cities. And so we recognize funding sources are difficult when you get to a county budget, but we're in different times now, and that's where I think we have to be creative. And my only hope is it's not too late, because something has to be immediate to make this happen, or we're down a path I don't know how to recover from. So, and the last thing I just talked about, incorporations, and yes, I think we've supported incorporations for a long time because we believe that contracting was kind of the wave of the future for the sheriff's department. But a place incorporating right now would be very difficult to find law enforcement services to provide them coverage, and hiring to either form their own department or contract with the sheriff's department. Nobody's got the numbers, and so those are challenges I just wanted to bring up.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for those comments. Committee Member Krueger.
Thank you, Chair Morrell. This has been a very enlightening presentation, and I just want to say thank you for sharing what we needed to hear, not what people might think we want to hear. It's very serious, and there's a lot of vulnerable people out there that depend on what you all do. And just to share on a couple of things that have been said, I never thought that you were thinking that any of us would be supporting defund. It just didn't occur to me that at all. And not everyone's a fan of incorporation, so. I'm wondering, you know, a lot of the issues here are because of the state making the rules that they have, and I'm wondering, can you elaborate anything on the efforts that were made in the discussions with the state? I mean, I can't help but believe if they heard or saw the presentation that you just gave, that, you know, that would have been their number one priority, is making sure the public was safe. Can you elaborate anything on obstacles, or it's just those were like out of your realm?
Yeah, I've not been a part of those discussions, and so I probably can't comment on that. I just know the frustrations of what I hear and read.
And, you know, I hear of some really ugly events, and more so in eastern Washington, but I'm wondering if you're of knowledge of any kind of like organized crime that has moved here. I just, you know, with open borders, I'm just hearing more of things moving up, and, you know, if they know we can't protect ourselves, what better place to go? So it's kind of like when my mom would say things about guns, I'm like, Mom, why do you think they don't ever shoot up a police station? So, you know, if they see a target here, do you see that happening?
Well, organized crime has been here for quite a while, and we've been familiar with, you know, several different groups. Whether there becomes an uptick in it now or not, I don't know. You know, seeing some of this and knowing that this is recorded and someone else can pull this up and watch it, and to hear that, you know, are they investigating all narcotics crimes now? It's difficult to say out loud because I know the repercussions of that. If someone thinks that's the, you know, green light to go ahead, the risks are down. Their risk reward is different than ours. And so does that change things? I'm afraid for the future in this county right now, just in the pattern.
Because I kind of grew up in a Mayberry kind of reality, and so it's very, you know, it's getting, you know, a little more out of hand here, and I, you know, the people are very different, or lifestyles, or thoughts. I don't know how to describe it either. Just, you know, how this explosion has happened in the last, you know, few years. There was something else
I think, one of the things I just mentioned a couple of times, but the street racing group is really, maybe it's a symbol of what we're seeing. It's this new attitude of just, I think I said it, of defiance towards law enforcement. People who are coming out, and now we're sending out emphasis teams to go out and try to address these issues. And what their groups are doing now is laying in the street to block law enforcement from getting there. They just lay down in front of in the road as just a way to say, nope, you're going to have to drive over me to get here. And then they do their things. And you look at the intersection of 9th and Pacific Avenue and look at just the amount of donuts or, what they've been doing there. You can drive in just about every intersection throughout unincorporated Pierce County and see on the bigger intersections where they just sit and take over an intersection and spin and spin and spin. But I think that's what the scary part of this is. The days of showing up to something and saying, oh, it's the cops, and people running or fleeing or taking off, it's not the same. It's now, they can't do anything to us. And so they're emboldened, they throw it in our face, and it just makes it very difficult. And when there's no repercussions to their actions, it's very painful. Chief Roberts just gave me an example of a subject that unlawful manufacture, just arrested for unlawful manufacture, unlawful delivery of a controlled substance with intent to deliver, or intent to distribute, 3 counts or 4 counts of unlawful possession of a firearm, and then removing the serial numbers, filing off the serial numbers to these guns. The prosecutor asked for $75,000 bail. This is a bad person in our society, and released on personal recognizance. So the team that just spent all this time doing this investigation to get this bad player into custody was now just released. It's not for lack of law enforcement trying. It's not for lack of prosecutor's office trying. It's some of these bail reform things, and this I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here, because there are people who shouldn't be in jail. But when you look at the histories of certain people that have a great record of problems, they shouldn't be back out. That's our concern, because now we have to go deal with this guy again. The guy who, I don't want to get into too much of these other things, but I'm just concerned about the violence in society, the defiance towards law enforcement, and how are you going to get people to stay in law enforcement, to confront this when the respect is taken away. And again, no comment was directed at this council, because you have shown great support, and I just continue to ask for that as we continue moving forward and looking at how to get creative in helping our people.
Yeah, that's where we want to be able to have more support if we can. And, you spoke of the repercussions or consequences, are there, if there are more areas where we can help to triage, again, I understand we are the funders, not, we can only make policy in certain areas. But I can't imagine how frustrating it is when you do all the work and the paperwork and the hours and hours that keep you away from doing other things, and then they go out, they get let go. And I don't know if there's more that we can do in that area with the jail now receiving more, but even so, I hear more of people going out the next day, they're held 24 hours. I don't know if there are outside influences that are affecting that maybe, there can be other influences that can counteract that. I don't know. I just want to commend you on all of the, when I think of that TV show Bad Boys or Cops or whatever it was, and there's some really stupid people out there that I'm like, I don't know how you hold your temper or keep your composure on a lot of things when you say, when you make commands and they deliberately do actions that I would think your instinct for survival would kick in, despite all of the training that you all have gone through. But just, thank you for that. Thank you for what you do, for, sharing what we need to know.
We have incredible people who do this job on a daily basis, and it astounds me to see what they're willing to stand up for and who they're willing to fight for on a daily basis. And I commend them for everything that they do, because they are so good at what they do. I wish more people could go and do ride-alongs and see them in action, because when you hear about something bad in law enforcement, it's not everybody. It's maybe one individual who did something poor on that one day. But men and women who do this, you ask them why, it's because they want to help people. They want to be in the communities that they grew up in. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. If you get, Chief Roberts has them write down on day one why they want to do this job, so we can bring it out and show them again, 20 years from now. They just love helping people. They're so good at it.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to be a part of them.
Thank you for those comments. Committee Member Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Lundberg. Again, appreciations to all our deputies and law enforcement and those that are on the outside supporting. We have our very own sitting here and always shows up during these tough conversations to be part of this process. I think I had one just technical question. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding. There's a graph on the median of pending time by priority. It's on slide 59. And I was just curious, the numbers, because the first I figured was minutes, and then the second, the numbers were those hours or days? I'm hoping not days.
I think they're minutes. I've got them on really small on my
Yeah.
paperwork here. I can't see them very well.
So it says like 6.5, 4.8, and it's median pending time. And in the
in
previous slide, I assumed it was time to dispatch was minutes, and I'm assuming this is, I was just trying to understand what the numbers meant.
Should be still minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, that helps. The second one is, when deputies make the choice to leave, do we have a process to kind of feel out the whys, including those that are going to retirement, and then do we use that, share it with your collective bargaining group to make sure that they know what is pushing people out the door, and that's part of the bargaining process that's being heard when you guys are at the table?
Yes and no. A lot of the retirements probably aren't doing exit interviews with those people, unless it's, a sit-down coffee type thing, because it's people that I got hired with or who are retiring now. But it's the resignations or someone who's going to another agency. We are doing some of those. Some are a little more formal than others. Just did one subject deputy he sent an email just explaining. I had asked to meet and was just most comfortable with an email. So it depends. We've met with a few. Some we have, some we haven't though.
Okay, because I would think even with ones that are retiring, especially if they're retiring early, but just anyone just to see what we can do, because those with 25 years of experience that have 3, 5, 10 more years, if that's doable for them, we want them to stay. If they've been in the service for 5 years and are flipping over to Tacoma, they're going to have different thought processes, and so really making sure that we're hearing the entire spectrum.
Yeah, we know that some have left, a lot have left for financial reasons. A lot have left for political reasons. They've left the state. And then there are those that have left for financial and salary or benefit packages to the Port of Seattle, which does a medical retirement. Once you're vested in that agency, then you get the medical retirement. And right now it's probably strongest in the financial part. And that retirement is huge because right now, we're losing this group that's supposed to be coming in as our new leaders. And those are the people who were out. And you can't just make someone a new leader, when you hire them. And so we're facing a very difficult few years. I don't know if it's going to be better in my career. Something to maintain, something to entice people to stay. I mean, we can give you our theories and say, oh, bring us a medical thing that gets people that will make them be here later in their career and stay, something to help carry over that to the end of their career before they get onto Medicare. Something along those lines, whatever it might be, or I don't know, the CBA is going to have to talk about what they want, but I'll tell you what might keep them here are those two things.
Okay. Thank you. And I have some learning to do about the bail reform. I knew there were some changes, but what you just outlined surprised me, so I will be doing some questioning, but I won't be taking your time. I'll do that on my own. You guys are too busy, so thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those questions and comments. Okay. We do have Councilmember Campbell that wants to comment.
I do. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. Chief, thank you very much for taking the time. Very informative. Definitely, going through all that data and a lot of data to absorb there. So thank you for presenting it in a way that's easy to understand. For a moment here, I thought I was perhaps being punked a little bit because as you started your presentation, there's a knock at my door and there was a detective outside my door. So I was like, was I supposed to be in the meeting? What? I'm just Zoom from home because of my meetings, but it turns out they were investigating a very serious crime that happened just outside. So this is impacting everyone in every neighborhood. Everywhere we see it on a daily basis. Just three quick questions. And when is the last time Pierce County Sheriff's Department was fully staffed?
I can't recall. I mean, it has been a while, and I know when I got in this position and they talked about vacancies that were in the teens, that was a lot. And we've moved well beyond the teens, from the 20s to the 30s to the 40s. Now we're in the 50s. And I don't know where you'd have to go back. I know when I was hired, it was 94, when they hired 54 of us in a levy. And maybe back then, it's about the last time it feels like we had.
My guess right around 2011.
2011.
Not 2010, 2011, as we had kind of recession and coming out of that.
Okay.
Was right about the point where we had, when we were at a zero vacancy. I mean, it was normal for us to have, just from normal attrition and with having us, the 14-month period where when somebody resigns or retires, then we would open that up to that position, then open up and go through the testing period, which takes, quite a bit of time in background. But where we were always around that kind of target zero was right around 2010.
Were you able to hear that, Councilmember Campbell?
I was.
Okay.
I was. I'm going to guess that was Lauren.
Yes.
Okay.
Come up for those folks who are at home. Sorry, again, I'm Lauren Well, and I'm our Chief of Staff for the Sheriff's Department. So I was the voice from the back of the room. It's nice to see you all today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for that information. I mean, as long as I've been on council or even been kind of elected locally, we've been chasing that number. And I know we had prior to, or the previous budget, we'd actually given authority that if you hire through your whole budget, you can go ahead, continue through the budget allocation. We'll get you more if you get it fully hired through. So I know we've been trying to chase this staffing issue for quite some time. And I'm going to guess even during the recession, maybe we reached full budget capacity. We probably were not at full capacity of what was needed, but rather we were at full budget capacity. And so I look, forward to more discussions around hiring, innovative ways to look at hiring. And I know a lot of places everywhere are looking at it. So I look forward to more conversation on that going forward. One of the discussions I had over this weekend with someone is with a local officer was talking about, he said, just looking forward to the new rules on Tuesday, meaning tomorrow. And so is it, I believe it is tomorrow that the changes from the legislature go into effect?
Some have already gone into effect.
Some have.
Oh, the jail?
Yeah, that's tomorrow, right? Yeah.
So what is it that goes into effect tomorrow?
One's for the jail, is what? You want to speak on that? You know that? I'm not well versed enough on the jail stuff.
Yes. Again, Kevin Roberts with the Sheriff's Department. Councilmember Campbell, and members of the committee and council, I'm going to apologize now if Chief Jackson comes running in after me. But out of respect, I'll answer the question the best I can. There's going to be information, if it's not already out, will be coming out, that, yeah, we're making some, and she's making some significant adjustments to the jail to where we're going to be opening back up for accepting most, if not all, arrests. We'll still be prioritizing the capability and the capacities to keep people in custody based on the nature of the crimes that they're being arrested for and availability of courts. But that significant frustration for our men and women, the community members, and everyone around the state with the impacts of COVID, we're starting to finally come out of those, fingers crossed and toes and everything else that we keep crossed. So I believe that's probably what was being referenced by whoever you were talking to about the Tuesday impacts.
That sounds about right. It was around a inability to arrest. So if we could get information when it comes out as to what the cap has been under COVID and what it's going to be beginning this week, that'd be some good follow-up information, the hard numbers.
Sure, we'll make notes and get that to council.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for the presentation and for the work that you do every day. I think my colleagues have said a lot of great things, so I'm not going to add a whole lot more. Just ask one last question. Did you get plastic forks out there at the substation?
I hope there's some by now, but fingers crossed. I had to use a set of tongs to eat my salad one day, so I'm familiar.
All right. Well, if you need a budget line item, let us know.
Towards the deputies.
And seriously, though, make sure that we are keeping everything staffed, because people do need the tools to do their job, and sometimes that means having the fork to eat the lunch. So thank you again very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I apologize. We were talking about the changes going into effect. I thought you were talking legislative changes, not the booking change.
Okay,
Now I know what you're talking about.
Thank you for those comments. Councilmember Campbell, is there any other questions of committee or council members that are online? Okay. Not seeing any, I would also want to try to make positive out of your presentation. We know we're in interesting times where a lot of things lined up to cause the challenges that we have within government, within law enforcement, and I think, as my council members, committee members stated, our respect for law enforcement is we're there for you, for the men and women out there in the streets. We obviously share concerns about the trend, and as you said, it's not just our department, it's nationwide. And we have got to get a handle on how we're going to deal with that, whether it's move forward with a different policing model or whether we have to adjust budgets accordingly. Obviously, by the response that this council showed to Deputy Dom Collada in the attendance of his memorial. That was the first time, and that's only the second one that I've attended where the full council came together and attended a memorial. I think there again, this council does want to do what we can do from a legislative and budget approach. And we hope negotiations come to some success where it doesn't have to go into binding arbitration or continue to kick that can down the road, because I think folks are doing the risk analysis on a spreadsheet nowadays and saying, well, if it's going to take another 4 or 5 months, that offer at Puyallup looks pretty good right now, so I'll go with that. If there are anything that, is there any proposals out there that you think are impactful that we can do from a policy standpoint, more than willing to take a look at. I know that this council has brought it forward pertaining to a lot of the property crimes out there, which, I usually hear about. If there's other ways that we could get reporting other than online, we would look at other ways of doing that, where they can, at least someone could show up with a smile on their face and say, I'm here to take your report. We'd look at those models also. The other thing is, obviously with vehicle thefts, the catalytic converter thefts are just through the roof. And I don't know if you've seen any successful programs out there. I've been monitoring all the states and their legislative attempts. I just don't see anything really making an impact. So that would be one that I'd, if there's an engraving program out there that would work, I don't know. Obviously, cat guards, shields don't necessarily work. They just make a little more creative to take the cat converter. So if there's anything that we could help in some of these spiking crimes, I would be more than willing to pursue those. So please, bring it forward, and we'd love to hear what works and what doesn't work, because we don't want to waste our time and neither do you. You just don't have the time anymore. So based on that, is there any closing comments that you would like to make?
I think I need to thank Chief of Staff Wallen for her help on this. She has been, her hand has been in so many different areas, helping us get things organized and figured out. And this has been a very challenging time, obviously, with the murder of Deputy Collada, and followed on top with the murder of Officer Rocha up in Everett. And it has put a new strain on our department. We have some deputies who were hired in 2018. This is their 4th funeral that they have been to for a peer since they've been hired, with Dan McCartney and Daryl Shuey and Cooper Dyson and now Dom Collada. And it is trying on people. And we talk about the rucksack with the, just keep putting the rocks in it. And these are boulders that are going in. And we always lose people after these. And on top of everything else, it's just what concerns me. And I guess, on behalf of the men and the women of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, I want to thank you for your support and ask for your continued support. And be very mindful of how important these next few days and weeks and maybe a month are, because it may be too late already, and that's my concern. The future of this department is hanging in the balance right now. And pray for them, pray for our communities. 'Cause I'm afraid of what the future's going to hold if we can't hang on to each other and keep this department going. That's all I've got. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you, though.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Captain Roberts, Lauren, nothing? Okay, enough said. Well, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the cold, hard facts. And there again, we understand your concern. So with that, Mr. Bridges, is there anything else before the committee?
No, no, sir. That's it for today. I can announce that the next meeting is on April 25, and we will receive a presentation again from the Sheriff's Department and their work with code enforcement.
Okay. Is there counts? Okay. Okay. Is there any comments from committee members or questions? Okay. With that, then we stand adjourned. Thank you for your patience.